Hey there guys, this is Sam
and Justin
at the Survival Review, and today we are going to be talking about the 1978 film Martin,
Yes.
directed by George A. Romero. Continuing our little tribute to George Romero, the George Romero-thon, if you will. And God, I love this movie.
Yeah, this is easily one of Romero's best films.
Yes.
And most unique.
Yeah, and less talked about.
Yeah,
which is
unfortunately
a complete shame, because people obviously think of his zombie films first, and a lot of people will think of Creepshow, and maybe a couple people think of The Crazies, but I don't hear a ton of people talking about Martin.
Yeah.
And it's a movie that's really worth talking about. I love this movie.
Oh yeah.
Of the three we're going to be talking about this month, this is my favorite.
Yeah, easily. Because this is Romero's take on the vampire genre.
Yes, and it's, of course, a very unusual take on it. It's got George Romero's kind of cynicism to it.
Yeah.
It's a very... it's kind of a realistic take on the vampire film, but in a weird way. It's...
Because, to be honest, in this movie, there might not even be a vampire in it.
There is a totally good chance that there is no vampire, and all the people who believe that there is a vampire, including the vampire, are just crazy.
Pretty much.
Which I love that. That's kind of how I like to view this movie.
Yeah.
Is that there's really no vampire, and they're just crazy.
Yeah, because this movie begins with Martin, this young man, who has a thing for blood. He really likes blood. And you see him on this train, and he attacks this woman in the train car.
And so the scene with the girl on the train, it kind of sets up Martin's approach to being a vampire. Because he's not your typical blah, blah kind of vampire, you know? He goes to these girls, and before he attacks them, he has this romanticized version of what's going to play out in his head, and it plays in black and white, and he's like, oh, it's going to be beautiful. She's going to be in there in her robe, and it's going to be lovely. And he busts in there, and she's got shit on her face. And she
comes out of the bathroom.
And he's just like, oh, fuck. And he's got this sedative in his hand, and he gives it to her, and she's screaming, and it's not going in... It's really dark and uncomfortable.
It's not pleasant.
No, it's a really unpleasant thing to watch, because he's essentially raping her.
Yeah.
And it's really just uncomfortable, and she's like calling him names. She's saying he's a pervert, rapist, and he's just telling her to be quiet. And then when she's finally passed out, he cuts her wrist with a razor blade. Yeah. And that's how he drinks her blood. And it's just a really gross, disturbing version of the vampire.
Yeah, that's how a lot of scenes are in this movie.
Yeah, it's just not fun to watch, but interesting. Like, you can't look away.
Then he goes to stay with his cousin, who's this old man, so relation's kind of weird, but this old man believes that he is a vampire.
He just tells him right off the bat. He's like, you are Nosferatu. I will destroy you.
Yes.
Here's your room.
Yeah.
Vampire. First, I will save your soul. Then, I will destroy you.
That's his favorite word.
It's
just Nosferatu.
Nosferatu.
It's so great.
It's great. He's kind of like a little bit of an over-the-top character. But I love it.
Nosferatu. Speak, Nosferatu. 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 He is young for Nosferatu. That makes it easy for Nosferatu. Nosferatu.
That's the Van Helsing to Martin.
Yeah, basically.
Even though they live together.
Yeah. And the whole movie is just like him trying to live his life in this house and, deal with his problem of his lust for blood, and also dealing with a crazy cousin who wants nothing more than for him to be dead.
Exactly. And so his cousin, he has a daughter who's played by George Romero's wife that lives in the house with them, and she hates her dad, and they've got a weird relationship because she thinks her dad's just fucking crazy because he's constantly talking about vampires. And she's like, I don't want anything to do with this family and these vampires and this nonsense. She doesn't believe in any of it.
No.
And she thinks that Martin is just kind of a disturbed kid.
And Martin takes his day job of just delivering like groceries to people around town, and he ends up becoming good friends with this one lady who just has this like husband who's never there, and she's just not happy at all.
She's just a depressed woman. She's constantly drinking, and you could tell that she's just kind of like fucked up.
Yeah.
So naturally Martin and her become friends, and they actually start sleeping together.
Yeah.
Which is like a big sort of thing for Martin, because Martin is extremely shy. Mm-hmm. Martin's very quiet. He doesn't talk to anybody really. Throughout the movie he doesn't really say a ton.
No.
And this is like it's kind of like a coming of age story, even though he's
really
supposedly hundreds of years old.
How old are you, Martin?
Oh, I'm old.
How old?
84.
Because after being with her, he starts to think, well, do I really need to do this whole thing? Do I need to like put those girls to sleep and all that kind of stuff? He starts to think, maybe I don't need to do this. Maybe I'm okay.
It's a little weird because she's a lot older than him.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, unless you believe he's a vampire and he's older than her. So
yeah.
It's weird either way.
This is probably Romero's most artistic film.
Yeah.
In that, like, there's a lot of, like black and white flashbacks where it looks like it's, like, many years in the past. And there's people, running and chasing after him, like old school, like, monster movie.
And you hear, like, Martin. There's, like, people chanting after him. And
yeah.
You kind of get the idea that he had some experience, like, back then. So if he was actually... It's either he's crazy and he's making all this stuff up in his head.
Yeah.
Or
it's actually flashbacks to many years in the past.
Hundreds of years ago.
And you can't tell because you do have that one black and white scene in the beginning of the movie on the train where you can tell that was just his imagination.
Yeah, and you have the same sort of thing in another scene where he's attacking this other woman that he's kind of following. It happens multiple times throughout the movie.
Yeah, so you don't know if the black and white stuff is flashbacks or if it's just his mind making stuff up.
Yeah, and either way, it works.
Yeah.
The movie can work no matter what you believe, and that's something I really like about this film is you can have your own interpretation as to whether Martin is a vampire or not.
And I also like the way the movie plays on the vampire lore
and
stuff like that, where you do see like garlic and cross and stuff that has no effect on him. And again, you can just think that, oh, he is just a crazy person, or that maybe it's just how this vampire works.
Or maybe it's because Kuda invited him into his home.
That too. Yeah, because there's stuff later on when he first drops off stuff to the one woman's house and he just stands outside the door.
Exactly.
And never comes in.
There are weird little things like that. And
you can interpret it in different ways. You can interpret it as he's a vampire and he can't come in, or he's just a shy guy who doesn't want to do that.
But there's a lot of stuff, especially some really clear statements by George Romero with like the magic trick.
Yeah.
Where he's saying there is no magic in real life, and that's where you're getting the cynicism that George Romero was kind of taking on it.
Things only seem to be magic. There is no real magic. There's no real magic ever.
Yeah, there's constantly moments like that in the movie.
There's no magic in the real world. It's all just what it is.
Yeah. There's one scene where just to taunt his cousin, Martin dresses up like a vampire with like the cape and stuff and has the fangs and stuff. At the end, after like scaring the crap out of me, he just like takes the fangs out and just goes, it's not real.
It's a costume.
Yeah.
It's just a costume.
And it's great. I love that.
Yeah. This movie is a very low budget. No. It's shot, like, it looks very cheap. Again, this really feels weird that this movie came out in between Crazies and Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah.
Because it really feels like it should have been before Crazies.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have that, like, big, grand kind of, like, Romero feel to it where he's doing the best with his budget and making the movie look bigger than it really is. This movie looks small. And it looks, like, grimy and very low budget, which I think helps the vibe of it. It helps it to feel a bit more real.
Yeah. And the whole thing takes place in kind of a shitty neighborhood.
Yeah.
And which kind of comes into play with like some gang members and stuff at one point during the movie.
Yeah, nothing's fancy looking at all. Just run of the mill, just like regular like real life.
Yeah.
And that actually really helps with the vibe of the movie. And also, just speaking of the cast in this movie, which is really good, the actor playing Martin is great.
I love him. He hasn't been in a ton.
No, he's appeared in other Romero films.
Yes, but not as a major character. He was a scientist in Day of the Dead.
Yeah.
Which is a shame because he's excellent as Martin, and this was like the role I think he was like born to play. He was perfect for that.
Yeah, he's
that
great.
shy the woman that he sleeps with.
Mm-hmm.
She says he's like a cat. He doesn't talk. He just sits there and listens. And that suits him well. That's kind of how Martin is.
Yeah.
He's just a quiet, shy kid.
Yeah. And the rest of the cast is great. The actor playing Kudo is just great. He's so entertaining. A little over the top at times, but it's a ton of fun.
Entertaining as hell.
Yeah. But also with the cast of the movie, you got a lot of great small roles in this movie. You have Tom Savini in the film.
Who also did the effects.
Yeah, this is his first collaboration with George Romero, and there's not like a whole lot of effect shots in this movie, but when there are there, they're really good and really effective. They look great. But he also does act in the movie, and he's really fun in the movie. It's cool to see him, just really cool seeing a really young Tom Savini in the film.
Yeah, he's great in it.
Yeah. And then, of course, the best like small appearance in this movie is George Romero himself playing a priest.
A priest. And he's kind of like this like hip priest.
Yeah,
you know?
he is.
He's like the right on dude kind of priest. And it's really funny. Kuda is harping on him like, won't you help me and figure out this shit with Martin and save his soul or whatever? And he's like, yeah, man, that's not really my thing, you know?
Do you believe the devil can enter a person's soul?
I don't know what to believe about that.
This other old guy, he'll probably do that. He said he saw The Exorcist and they got it all wrong.
And he goes like, you see that movie? I like that movie.
Yeah, I like that.
You know, he went to see that film, The Exorcist. He said they did it all wrong.
Zulimas.
I don't suppose you saw that movie. I thought it was great.
So good.
It's a small role, and I wish he was in it more, just because he's so entertaining. But it was great seeing him actually have he has little cameos in all of his movies. He just briefly appears in them. But this was I think the only time he really played a character in his films.
The only time I can think of. So
yeah, and he was great. Like I love seeing him in there.
Absolutely.
The ending of this movie is really shocking, and it's another one of the classic Romero like downbeat, depressing endings. Yeah. But it's so effective.
Yes. I couldn't imagine this movie ending any other way because it services the tone of the movie perfectly and just kind of the dour unpleasantness of this world that Martin's in. Yeah,
it's great. It's totally... I remember when I first saw it, I was like, oh crap, like, I was not expecting that. I'll say I have like, I guess some little minor like flaws in the movie. I do feel that the last half does kind of, I feel like, meander a little bit until it gets to the final, like, scene of the movie.
I could see that.
Like, it doesn't really have as much of a direction of where it's going in, like, the last, like, few minutes of the movie. But that's, like, my only real gripe with this movie. Overall, I think this is a very unique horror film. Yeah. In fact, it's not even really much of a horror film.
No, it's kind of a character drama.
It really is. It's a character drama.
It's a really just interesting look at this character of Martin and the people around him as well.
Yeah, and there's good horror sequences in it. Like I just mentioned the sequence with the train at the beginning, and there's a sequence in the middle of the movie where he attacks this couple. And that's a really good scene. Some suspense stuff, some of it's a little silly, though, when he's jamming the phone. And yeah.
It's so weird.
But, like, that's a really good scene, and actually kind of creepy, just the idea of, like, this person trying to get into your house. And the fact that there is someone in your house that you don't know of. Like, I like how the scene plays out where it's this lady who's actually cheating on her husband. Mm-hmm. And when Martin breaks through the door, he's expecting just her to be there. And it turns out the guy that she's cheating with is there too. And he thinks that Martin is the husband.
Yeah, so he's like, oh, I'm not... And she's like, I don't know him!
Yeah.
No reason to get upset about anything, okay?
I don't know him!
It's crazy.
It's great. Like, those are the most kind of, like, horror-esque scenes in the movie. And, of course, the final scene is very horror-esque. But overall, it's a very good, like, character drama, like we were saying earlier.
Yeah.
So, out of 10...
Out of 10, I'm going to give this movie a solid 9 out of 10. There's very little I could complain about with it. I think it's a movie that a lot more people should see because it's one of George Romero's best.
I also give it a 9 as well, I agree. Definitely worth it. Like I said, no real gripes with the movies. I feel like the last half kind of meanders a bit. Aside from that, like, the movie is not cliched, like, at all.
No.
Which is really surprising. And it's just a very unique take on the vampire genre that, like we said, might not even be a vampire movie. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's Martin. Again, definitely check it out. It's great.
Please. Like, we can't recommend this movie enough. It's seriously worth giving a watch.
Yeah.
That's about all we've got to say about it. Until next time, we're going to be talking about...
one of our guilty pleasure Romero films.
It's not one of his perfect movies, but we love it.
Yes.
And we're excited to talk about it, and that's Monkey Shine.
Yes.
So until then, we will see you guys later.